but these are just things to keep in mind of when the project's actually finished, what do I need to do now to finish my backyard off? Alrighty, well, welcome back. We're going to move into now section 2 of talking about the pricing of a swimming pool. So if you didn't watch it already, I think it's really good to go and watch it. In episode 1, we cover the must-haves of what you will need to start off your swimming pool build process and the pricing structure. So if you haven't watched it, it's a really good tip, go and watch number 1, and then this is now following on to number 2. So what we're going to talk about here now in number 2 is we're going to talk about the additionals that we need to add onto the pool after we have already done the build stage. Now, a couple of things that are going to alter your pricing. I'm going to start off with is additional concrete. So I started off in the first episode talking about doing the 400 beam, which is the structure component of the swimming pool. Now we go on to what we talk about as additional. So how much concrete do you want around the swimming pool? So generally speaking, a 400 tile is just like I said, a 1 coping tile. If you're going to go down the road of doing a limestone or a travertine, they are a 400 deep tile by a 600 length tile. So that works very well for just a standard coping tile. If you move into more of your porcelain stuff, porcelain comes standard as a 600 by 600. So you might want to just add that extra 200 mil all the way around your swimming pool and just have a 600 beam all the way around. If you want to go 2 tiles, you could move up to a meter or 1200, vice versa, 400 to 800 for limestone or travertine. Now what we generally try and do is when we are building now an area, so we're now moving into the lifestyle of the swimming pool. What we try and do is build an area in the pool area where you might be able to at least put 1 or 2 chairs if the space is really tight. If we have a lot of excessive amounts of room in the pool area, or we've got a big backyard, what I try and tend to say to a client is let's add an area where we can maybe seat or put some lounge chairs in, enough area that you can have a few people sitting in the pool area but still have room for people to walk around and things like children running around the swimming pool. So generally speaking, doing 2 tiles for a walking area is enough. When we start to have areas where a pool fence is going to be in that zone of where we're walking, going down to a 400 tile, so a 1 coping tile, can be quite tight. There's not enough room. Now when you do a fence, a pool fence, especially if you're doing glass, you need to be actually inside that tiling by around 80 to 100 mil. So if you can imagine, if you've only got a 400 tile, we're only got an allowable space now of 300 mils to walk, which is quite tight. But in saying that, we work with what we've got. So if we have an excessively tight area, we try and make one area that is nice and open and big for you to be able to use and swim. But generally speaking, if you're only going to be walking in the other areas, I don't really see the need to spend the money in doing bigger concrete areas if all you're going to do is walk. There's other ways that you can help soften the area in the pool by doing some landscaping, some gardens and plants and things like that. But if you really want to keep it as low maintenance as you can, well, obviously just concrete and tiling, everything is going to be the best option for that. Now we're going to move into things like drop edge beams. Now, was your pool built on a block that was on a slope? Now what we talk about, you'll hear a lot of people say this in the pool industry is, do you have a sloping block? Or do you need a drop edge beam on your pool? I might add a couple of photos in here just to give you guys a bit of an idea of exactly what a drop edge beam is. But effectively what it is when you have 2 different height elevations and you want to make the pool at the top height, well then the bottom section has to drop down. Now I talked about keeping the pool as a CDC, which is you can't build the pool any more than 600 mils out of the ground. If the backyard has an excessive slope on it, what we'll do is you can do a cut and fill process. So excavate a section of material out and push that material over, which is a cut and fill, to make sure that the pool is no more than 600 out of ground. And then when we do the concrete, we pour the top, what we call a coping, so around the swimming pool, and then we pour the drop edge beam. Now the drop edge beam acts as 2 structures. Effectively, it's now a retaining wall because it's keeping the material that is obviously backfilling the pool, and the material that is where the concrete is, it's keeping it all intact, and obviously it becomes just a nice finish. When you go down the avenue of doing drop edge beams, usually then we'll have things in called piering. So this is now stuff that I start to talk about where the budget can start to push. So if we're going to do a drop edge beam, we need to fill the area underneath the concrete, so we're not using as much concrete. Now in doing that, we need to make the structure strong. We need to make it sound. I'm building a product that I have to warrant for 7 years with the concrete. I need to make sure that when I'm building it as safe as I can and as structural as I can. So what we would generally do, what we always do, I should say, is we run a row of piers through the center of the beam. That helps support the concrete beam itself. We found that on stable ground, usually the same bearing as a swimming pool. That way everything will move together as one. Now what will generally happen is if you don't do this, the material that is under the concrete that you pour over the top of, over time, saturation of soils and clays, the clays and the soils will expand and then they'll contract again. So what will generally happen is over time, if it's not compacted correctly, that soil and clay will drop, and then you will now have the concrete beam is self-supported. If you don't have piers, what can tend to happen is you'll get cracks in your concrete. It's exactly like a table. Imagine a table. A table doesn't have legs going all the way around it. Like it doesn't support itself on all 4 sides. A table has 4 legs, and those 4 legs help support a table. Now we're doing the same thing with concrete. We need to support the concrete beam itself. We don't want the pool shell to become reliant as a structure, because then we're now decreasing the integrity of the pool shell, and then we don't want the concrete just to be reliant on the clay that's under it. If it's not compacted properly, it's not going to work. So this is where I always talk about picking your builder as well. Make sure you do your research, get the right builder. Make sure they're going to do the correct job for you so you don't have problems down the track. Now we're going to move into accessories, coping tiles. So there are, I would say, probably 3 main coping tiles to choose from. The first option is probably the most cost effective, which is going to be a travertine. Travertine tile is very accessible. It's quite a high maintenance tile though, so I'm going to talk a little bit about costings. The second one is going to be a limestone. Limestone tiles have become very popular in the last 3 years. And then the third option is going to be porcelain. Now what you will find is not a lot of pool companies will want to do porcelain. One, it's quite a hard tile to lay, as in it's very precise. Porcelain's a made product, so it's very exact. It's very straight lines. Porcelain is a very level tile. It can be quite difficult to lay and quite difficult to cut. Now, when we do a porcelain tile, we do a porcelain tile with a drop edge on it. It helps make a really nice product. It's a very, very nice finish on a swimming pool. We do that on all of our products. Now we back it and we warrant it. You will hear some people say that the tiling manufacturer won't warrant the tile. Yes, that is correct. A tile manufacturer will not warrant a drop edge tile. We get it made and fabricated by a company after we purchase the tile. And then from there, we warrant the tile. So we silicone the underside of the tile. But this is something that you need to think of on costings. Now I'm going to break it down into a couple aspects for you. Porcelain is more expensive to lay. Porcelain is more expensive to buy, but the maintenance is practically zero. So it's the same as usually a tile in your house. Porcelain is a fully non-porous product. It doesn't matter what you drop on it and what you spill on it. Pretty much it can just be cleaned off as long as you get onto it pretty quick. You can use somewhat chemicals on it to help clean it, but it's a very tough product. Porcelain is man-made, so it's very easy to be able to maintain around a pool for low maintenance. Now, when you go down the path of a limestone or a travertine, they are obviously a bit cheaper to purchase per square meter or per linear meter. They're very easy to lay, being limestone or travertine. They've already got the rough texture in them. So I wouldn't say being precise isn't as important, but you can get away with little things where the porcelain, you can't get away with a chip tile. You can see it, it's got to come up. When we go down the avenue of limestone, it's got defects in it. It's a limestone or a travertine. But the downfall is with limestone and travertine is the ongoing maintenance. It needs to be sealed regularly. What we've also found is porcelain has a slip rating on it that is actually manufactured in a factory. We find that the porcelain has a better slip rating than the travertines and the limestones. The limestones, they usually do a sandblast finish on them or a rock finish on them. What I mean by that is they use a material to help roughen up the surface so that it's not slip. The old school days, you might have seen people would actually add glass into the sealer of travertine because travertine is so smooth and it's very slippery. Over the past 5 years, I've probably only done, I'm being dead serious, 3 pools with travertine. Travertine's pretty much almost non-existent anymore. Limestone is a much nicer product. It's got less defects in it. It's more of a solid product. I personally like limestone more than porcelain, but it's just a preference of what you guys want to pick. If you're happy with the maintenance on the limestone, it's definitely something to go down of. Whereas if porcelain, you're after a more elegant, sleek, and a more modern look, porcelain's the way to go. But just something to think about in your costings when you're looking at it. We're also going to move down into fencing. So fencing is a very broad subject. Now we supply the fencing for our customers when we do a project, we quote it for them, and we've got a fence that we've used for the past 10 years now. We haven't used anybody else who comes and does our fencing. He does our aluminium and glass fencing. But what I just said there, they're really what you need to look at in your budget of what can change. So these are the extras that can really push your budget. Are you gonna go an aluminium fence? Are you gonna go a full glass fence? Are you gonna go glass with a handrail on it? Are you gonna do, there's new stuff on the market now with custom aluminium stuff. It's more blade type fencing. There's really, the scope is massive on pool fencing. It's actually really gotten quite a niche market now too. The pool fencing side of it is trying to make something that's not quite a nice thing to look at, fencing, but try and make it look good. So there's a couple of companies out there that are doing some really good stuff with it, but that's just where it becomes expensive. You're doing stuff that's not quick and easy, and as normal, aluminium is the easiest stuff to buy and it's the easiest stuff to install. What you can look at doing, and what we generally do a lot of the time, is the area of the pool that you're going to view from the house. We tend to maybe possibly do that in just glass, frameless glass with spigots, whether it be copper, white or black or whatever. And then from there, we can do things like do aluminium on another 2 sides or one other side, depending on how much of the pool you need to fence off. This all comes down to your budget and what you want. I never ever recommend doing a full wrap of glass on a swimming pool, whether that be 3 sides or 4 sides. What you will find is glass is very hot. It attracts obviously the sun when it's coming through. It is very echoey, glass, and it gets no wind or breeze through it. So I always recommend, if you can, try and do something else to break it up, to get that airflow in. If you can't, try and soften it with some plants or something like that. It just becomes quite an echo chamber doing glass all the way around. Yes, it looks nice and it's elegant, but it's not always the most practical thing. You got to think of cleaning as well, cleaning the glass. Yes, there's those Euro Shield stuff on the market. You can put on your pool, on your glass fence, but it's the same again. You got to keep maintaining things like that. Now we're going to move into, so the pool's been done. Now, do you need to now do retaining walls for your landscaping around the pool? Now, remember how I talked about the drop edge beam? You could potentially now have a very different scope of your backyard now that your pool is there. A lot of the time, us being a pool building and landscaping background and construction, we always do this for our clients if needed. So obviously we quote all this stuff for you guys when we're doing it. We've got all the machinery and capabilities to do it. But you need to remember as well that there might be things that you're going to have to do if you don't want a pool builder or a landscaper to do. You might have to do yourself. So do I need new retaining walls now because I've changed the landscape of my yard? You need to think about drainage. Drainage is one of the most important things that people overlook that can affect their swimming pool in their backyard the most and cause the most damage. Drainage is very important. Getting water away now from your backyard, if you have now reshaped your yard, is very important. Building retaining walls is going to cause water to build up behind walls. We need to get rid of that. Vice versa for your swimming pool. We need to make sure that your pool cavity isn't always full of water. I might talk a little bit more about hydrostatic stuff with swimming pools later, but you need to make sure that you're moving that water away. Another thing to look at is obviously the landscaping around the pool. You've had machinery come in and make quite a mess if you're doing them with heavy machinery, such as a 3.5 ton excavator and a bobcat. You're going to have to possibly returf a certain area of your backyard or your side path if we're traveling up and down the side path. We do the most that we can by using protective mats and things like that. Obviously other builders have the same things, but these are just things to keep in mind of when the project's actually finished. What do I need to do now to finish my backyard off or finish my side path off? Did you have to remove a fence to get machinery in? Did you have to remove an aircon unit or a gas meter or something like that? These are all things that can build up into your final budget and your final pricing that you need to be aware of. Planting around the pool. Are you going to add things like your decorations and your seating and chairs and stuff like that? That's probably something that you don't really need to do and look at in budgeting because it's just something you're going to get later. But these are all things that are going to end up coming to what did it actually cost me to finish the project the way that I wanted it or the vision that I had. Everybody has a vision of what they've seen on Instagram or Pinterest. Now, they want to try and build that vision as much as they can, but being prepared to know what the costs are is going to be very important to make sure that you're happy at the end. The last thing that I want as a builder and someone in the swimming pool industry is to deliver a product to a client and they're not happy because either they didn't get what they thought they were getting or the budget blew out to such a point they didn't know because we didn't talk to them about it. We don't do that. We make sure that you guys are well prepared from the day one. Alrighty, let's move on to now ongoing expenses. Now, these are going to be things that you're going to have to keep on doing regularly to keep your swimming pool as best as you can. Now, I already talked about sealing your limestone or your travertine tiles. Now look, it's not something that you have to do, not everyone does it, but to keep the maintenance up and make sure your pool area looks really nice, you need to do it. By not sealing it, you're going to get things like greeny tinges from algae, where water sits for an excessive amount of time. The salt water from your pool, you don't really want that sort of sitting on the tiles without a sealer on it because limestone and travertine is a porous product. So anything that lands on that tile is going to be absorbed into it. So these are things where sealing tiles is very important for the longevity of your backyard and your investment of a pool. Your ongoing maintenance costs. Now, I will do a breakdown soon of what the pros and cons are of the self-cleaning and the standard suction to return pool. I've talked about it a little bit in another episode that I dropped. But the studies have been done and the cost savings by having a self-cleaning pool over a 5 to 10 year period is a lot cheaper than having a standard suction to return pool. So use the analogy that I spoke about with the porcelain. It's more expensive to buy at the start and it's a little bit more expensive to lay, but the ongoing maintenance of porcelain is nearly zero. So it's almost the same when we talk about self-cleaning. We're adding the things in it now to make it easier for you in the long run. Now, ongoing maintenance, you need to take water test samples up to a pool shop, get your water chemistry tested. If you don't have a full water automation system, now that's what I mean is if you just have a standard chlorinator where it doesn't read you out anything. You need to test your water to find out your pH, your total chlorine levels, your alkalinity, things like that. Obviously adding salt and acid into your pool and alkaline and stabilizer and buffer and things like that, they're pretty standard things. I will talk about it a little bit more in the breakdown of the self-cleaning stuff in another episode, but the longevity of a pool that's maintained correctly means that you need to use less chemicals because you're not fluctuating the pHs and the acids and the chlorine levels a lot. So that's when you start to spend a lot of money on balancing your pool because you're letting it get out of control. You're not getting on top of it when it needs it. You're not adding the things that need it. That's where I talk about water automation. It tells you when it needs things. It lets you know, hey, you need salt, you need acid, you're running out of acid, things like that. You can check your chlorine levels and things like that. Other than that, I don't think there's anything really much more to touch on other than maybe you guys doing a bit more research on all the other things out there in the market that you can obviously add into a swimming pool. I'm trying to think of some things that I might have forgotten. There are some things like, you might want to build a cabana and have an outdoor area with seating and tables and chairs and things like that. But that's all stuff that you can get later on. I'm trying to talk a bit more about what's going to get your project done as quick as you can so that you can enjoy the money that you spent straight away. What I don't like to see is people that spend every cent that they had to get the pool product, but there are little things that they could have maybe not done right now and they could have had a completely finished project. Because there's nothing more than you doing that project and you actually can't enjoy the full value of it because you ran out of money. That's the last thing you want. You're not gonna buy a car and only get 2/3 of it, you know what I mean? So you gotta have a budget that you wanna work with. And that's why we are so transparent up front from the very beginning, answering questions and things like that. But anyway, I hope you guys like this little segment, episode 1 and 2, about understanding the pricing structure a bit more. There is a lot more as well involved into it, but I tried to keep it as basic as I can. This is more for just everyday swimming pools. But yeah, if you like the stuff, like the content we're doing, give us a like and a share. We're obviously now on Instagram, Spotify and YouTube, so you can go and see us there. Give us your feedback, let us know maybe what you guys want to hear me talk about a bit more, maybe another little category or aspect of something that you guys find interesting. But if not, if I don't see you soon, enjoy your swimming pools and enjoy the process of finding your pool. Thank you.